Did you feel at the time you were close?
They told me I was close.
Oh,
yeah.
Then yes.
They told me it was just down to me and Daniel, and I was the younger option.
Got it.
And I think, yeah, they obviously went with Daniel, and I think it was an amazing choice to go with Daniel. I probably wasn't ready at the time.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. And you?
The same.
How do you take it?
Straight up, with a twist. Thank you, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
So in case you've been locked in Dr. No's dungeon for the last week or so and somehow missed it, the Bond community has been full of reckons and hot takes about the leaked footage of Henry Cavill's audition for the role of James Bond from all the way back in 2005. This is one of the holy grails of lost Bond media, so it's not surprising that people are so excited that it has suddenly come to light almost 20 years later. It's well known that Henry Cavill was the runner-up to Daniel Craig when the new Bond was cast for Casino Royale. The story goes that director Martin Campbell favoured Cavill but was overruled by Barbara Broccoli in favour of Craig, and well, the rest is history. But the idea of Henry Cavill as James Bond has never really gone away, and basically since Skyfall, fans across the internet have been clamouring for him to replace Daniel Craig. Then in 2015, Guy Ritchie made The Man from U.N.C.L.E., in which Cavill stars as a dashing secret agent in the 1960s, and well, that just sealed the deal for many that this man was born to play 007. And even though I've never really been one of those people, I can understand where they're coming from. Not only does he have the looks, the charm, the physicality and the sophistication, more importantly, he also seems to be genuinely passionate about the character and the role. And so I can only imagine the disappointment the Cavill fans felt when they opened up the audition and saw, well...
It appears we share the same passions. 3, anyway.
I count 2. Motoring and baccarat.
𝗙𝗡𝗘𝗥𝗬𝗪𝗛𝗘𝗥.
I hope your third is where your real talent lies.
One rises to meet the challenge.
Double.
Sweetie.
Yeah, so that's not a good look for the Cavalrine, and the reactions were a mix of people saying that Eon were right all along to have gone with Daniel Craig, while other people who were still in the bargaining stage of grief reasoned that, okay, maybe he wasn't a good actor in 2005, but 10 years later in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. he proved he's gotten better. And look, I've never really paid that much attention to the conversation about Henry Cavill as Bond, not because I don't think he'd be a good Bond, but because he's just not going to get the role, and so I felt like it was kind of pointless talking about it. I made a whole video about why he won't ever become Bond, but basically it comes down to the fact that he's just too famous. Eon tend to cast someone who is relatively unknown to global audiences, so that they can come into the role of Bond with a clean slate. There's no way that Superman is ever going to become 007. Had he been cast back in 2005 instead of Daniel Craig, then I'm sure he would have done very well in the role, but the ship has long since sailed on any prospect of him becoming Bond, even though he still very much keeps the door open to the idea when he's asked about it.
If they came a-calling, would you say yes?
I would definitely have a conversation. I think there's...
Lunch? Possibly a lunch?
Lunch.
Yeah.
But this audition tape, where we have to watch Henry staring intently at someone off screen while speaking his lines very softly, has quite rightly made a lot of people second guess how they feel about the idea of Cavill as Bond. But the thing about this tape is that, well, I don't think it's very fair to Henry Cavill, and remember, I say that as someone who isn't really that big a fan of the idea of him being Bond. But you also have to remember that this is a 20-year-old recording on an old camcorder in 480p with a terrible microphone where the framing is totally static and you have long periods of silence while Cavill stares at someone off screen while he reads 4 separate takes of the scene from Goldeneye where Bond meets 𝗙𝗏𝗏. And it doesn't help the fact that the person he's doing the reading with is sitting closer to the microphone than he is, so we can hear her far better than we can hear him, which makes his soft line readings barely audible sometimes.
This one is an admiral.
I like one who enjoys pulling back.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Bond.
Pleasure, I'm sure. It was all mine.
And then on top of that, you have the fact that we Bond fans have had this scene, and specifically Pierce Brosnan's performance in it, etched into our brains since 1995, and so of course anything different is always going to feel weird to watch.
You think we better, huh?
No, just different.
Like Roger Moore always used to talk about how paranoid he used to get filming Live and Let Die that he'd end up doing a Sean Connery impression when he had to say,
My name's Bond. James Bond.
And I think the same thing is going on here. The one thing anyone auditioning for Bond is thinking when reading a scene from Goldeneye is, don't just copy what Pierce Brosnan did. The casting director isn't looking for an impersonation, they're looking for someone who can bring their own interpretation to the character. And to Cavill's credit, we do kind of see this. Like when Pierce asks 𝗙𝗏𝗧𝗏 where she's from, it's a question.
Your accent, Georgian?
But when Cavill does it, he's stating it as a fact.
Your accent, Georgian.
It's subtle, but it's different, and it shows the character being a bit more assertive. It's a different way to read the same line, and that's what a casting director wants to see. And of course there's a balance to be struck, as I'm sure Sam Worthington found out when he decided to completely change the dialogue and make James Bond sound like an extra in Crocodile Dundee.
Very good, Mr. Bond.
Let me tell you something, your accent's Georgian.
Very good, Mr. Bond. You've been to Russia.
And not really, but on occasion I do like to.
Okay, cut. Let's start again.
Very good, Mr. Bond. You've been to Russia.
Not recently. Fuck it. Your accent is Georgian. In fact, your accent, what's your name again? My name is Bond, James Bond.
Anyway, the point is that when we watch this tape as Bond fans, we're comparing a potato quality home video that was never meant to see the light of day to a scene from one of the best movies of all time and criticizing it for falling short.
Point taken.
Yes, Henry Cavill's performance here is hardly comparable to Pierce Brosnan's in Goldeneye, but it's also not entirely fair to compare this reading to this scene. But that got me thinking, what if you could compare them? What if you edited this audition into the scene from Goldeneye so that you could actually get a proper feeling for how Henry Cavill's Bond performance might look in the proper context? Well, that is exactly what I have done in this video, but before we get to that, we need to talk about this audition tape a bit more. Because just like we can't make a judgment on Henry Cavill's performance without putting it in the context of the scene, we also can't really judge his performance without knowing what this is actually a video of. This audition, along with the 3 others that were recently shared on Ron South's YouTube channel, more on him later, were probably all shot at a relatively early stage in the casting process. Even though this is called a screen test in the video title, it's not really that. A screen test is basically a mini film shoot, and we've seen these before from past Bond hopefuls. You have a crew and costumes, the scene is blocked and directed and rehearsed so that the producers and casting directors and so on can understand how this actor looks and sounds on screen. Obviously, because this is quite a faff to organize, this sort of screen test happens quite late in the casting process. And while it is likely that Henry Cavill almost certainly did film a screen test like this one that we've seen of Daniel Craig, this video is not that. This video and the others like it is more like a reading, where an actor is given a scene to read with another actor or a member of the casting team. And what that means is that the actor will probably not have rehearsed the scene an awful lot beforehand, and even if they did, they probably did so with minimal direction or instruction to guide them in how they should deliver the lines.
Seems we share the same pleasures. Can I start again?
So that probably goes some way to explaining the fairly wooden performance that we're seeing from Cavill. But another reason this video feels so weird to watch is because 00 Henry is talking to and looking at someone off screen for the whole time, but we never cut away from him and barely even changed the framing. But film is a visual medium, and simply by cutting from one person to a reaction shot of the other actor can convey a lot of character nuance that is missing from this tape. Like in the original scene, there's lots of long, drawn-out pauses where there is no dialogue, but a lot is going on as Bond and 𝗙𝗏𝗡𝗧𝗏 play cards and eye-fuck each other over the baccarat table. This is acting, just as much as the line readings are, but it's something that is missing from the Cavill audition. So I wanted to see what Henry Cavill's Bond would actually be like. I wanted to take this audition tape and put it into its proper context, to see how much that changed his performance. And the results, I think, will surprise you.
Right, let's get on to more practical matters.
So the first thing I did was clean up the audio of Cavill's audition video so that instead of sounding like this,
I never learned that trick. Perhaps you'll show me how it's done.
It sounds like this.
I never learned that trick. Perhaps you'll show me how it's done.
Then I took the original scene from Goldeneye and cut out all the shots of Pierce Brosnan and replaced him with Cavill. Like any film editor would do, I also used Cavill's best take on each of his lines, which were spread across the 4 readings that he did. For example, his Bond James Bond is from his 3rd take, but his We Share the Same Passions is from his 2nd. Then I fixed the framing of the Cavill shots to be close-ups so that they match the close-ups of 𝗙𝗏𝗡𝗧𝗏, and after that, I needed to make the 𝗙𝗏𝗡𝗧𝗏 scenes look like Cavill, so I changed the aspect ratio to be 4.3, adjusted the color grade, tweaked the brightness and the temperature, downgraded the resolution, then added a soft blur and some JPEG damage to match the camcorder quality as best I could.
It won't match.
It doesn't have to match.
After that, it was just a simple matter of ripping the surround sound audio tracks off my Goldeneye DVD so that I could separate the music from the dialogue in the original scene, isolate Onatop's vocals, and run the backing music across the two sets of dialogue and add a stock crowd sound effect in the background to replace the sound of the casino, and just like that, you have a scene that, to the best of my ability, actually shows us what Henry Cavill's James Bond would look like.
You finished?
Yes.
Good.
Obviously, it isn't perfect. Like, I can't do anything about the fact that he's obviously sitting in a different room and isn't wearing a tuxedo, and also there's a bit where they're standing up, which means the framing doesn't really match, but on the whole, I think this edit is a far more accurate representation of what Henry Cavill's Bond might look like when he's in a scene with proper music and sound effects, and where we can see how he might play off another actor. In short, it will hopefully show you what it is a casting director sees when they watch a video like this one. Anyway, you're here for the edited scene, so here it is.
Banker. It appears we share the same passions. 3, anyway.
I can't do motoring and baccarat.
8 pour la banque. 7. Madame wins.
I hope the third is where your real talent lies.
1 rises to meet the challenge.
Double.
Sweetie. Cut.
Madame stands with 5. 6. Madame loses.
Bliatch. Enjoy it while it lasts.
3 words I live by. But tell me, what are the words you live by?
The trick is to quit while you're still ahead.
I never learned that trick. Perhaps you'll show me how it's done. 𝗙𝗙𝗘𝗧𝗪𝗪, shaken not stirred. And you?
The same.
And how do you take it?
Straight up, with a twist. Thank you, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
𝗙𝗩𝗘𝗥𝗬𝗪𝗛𝗏 Onatop.
What?
Onatop.
Your accent. Georgian.
Very good, Mr. Bond. You've been to Russia?
Not recently. I used to drop in occasionally. Shoot in and out.
It's very different now. A land of opportunity.
Perhaps with a Ferrari in every garage.
No, not quite. That belongs to a friend.
Tip for your friend. The registration plates for the French new models all begin with letter L. Even the counterfeit ones.
Oh, and what rank do you hold with the motor vehicles department, Mr. Bond?
Commanding.
Should we go?
This one is an admiral.
I like a woman who enjoys putting rank.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Bond.
The pleasure, I'm sure, was all mine.
Like I said, it's not perfect, but I think it's a much fairer representation of Cavill's performance in this audition. Again, I'm not doing this because I'm part of the #CavillForBond crowd. I'm really not. I did it to show you the difference between judging an acting performance based off raw footage compared to a properly edited scene, and I think it's pretty enlightening. It's easy for us to look at a video of this quality with terrible audio and immediately write it off, but doing that doesn't accurately reflect the way in which cinematic acting depends as much on the editing as it does on the actor's performance. It also ignores the context that these videos were probably filmed while the casting team were doing an early sweep of potentially dozens of actors, and will probably have been filmed for the purposes of their internal reference to keep track of all the different candidates rather than as a serious audition tape. Which brings us to the final question. Where the hell did these videos even come from? Well, they were uploaded a couple of weeks ago onto the Ron South YouTube channel without comment or context. And there's been a fair amount of speculation that some of the original audition tapes were stolen from the casting director's rubbish by tabloid journalists looking for a scoop, and while that may well be the case, I think there's a less sinister explanation. Click through to the linked channels on Ron South's page and you'll find Ron's other channel, which includes his showreel as a professional film and TV editor. So this guy looks like the same Ron South who IMDb tells me is a professional film and TV editor, whose filmography matches the editing reel on YouTube. And if we go back to 2005, well, Ron South was first assistant editor on The Legend of Zorro, which was directed by none other than Casino Royale's Martin Campbell. Campbell was announced as the director of Casino Royale in February 2005 so that he could be involved in the casting, and Zorro would have been in post-production around the time these auditions were being held. So I think Martin just asked Ron South to help edit or collate some of these tapes, maybe for his own reference or for sharing more widely, who knows? Well, Ron South and Martin Campbell know, but we don't, so we have to wildly speculate on the internet about it.
They'll print anything these days.
I guess Ron just had some of these tapes lying around in his archives and maybe decided that 20 years was long enough for the NDA to have expired. Ron, if you have any more of these, please share them with us. Anyway, whatever the reason Ron had these tapes and chose to share them now, I am delighted that they came to light. Any new piece of Bond history is a treasure, especially ones like this that give us a tiny glimpse behind the curtain of one of the most secretive casting processes in all of cinema. And I hope that my small edit, putting Henry Cavill's long-lost Bond audition into its proper context, can also provide a quantum of solace to fans of his who never got the chance to see him take on the mantle of 007.